Many people hold themselves back in relationships because they have been taught to fear what love might expose. Welcome back to the Revolution Resolution. I'm Malaika Tubbs. In the last few episodes, we've been talking about the way American patriarchy shapes relationships, caregiving, and community. We've explored how relationships were organized around hierarchy instead of mutuality, and how systems that isolate caregivers also fracture connection more broadly. Today, I want to move even deeper into the emotional consequences of that inheritance. Because so many people long for intimacy while fearing emotional honesty. Because of what we've been taught before we enter relationships, vulnerability feels dangerous even inside relationships where love is present. Because our vulnerability has been met with consequences in the past. Most people were never taught how to safely express fear or sadness or uncertainty or need. Instead, many of us learned that certain emotions made us vulnerable to rejection, punishment, shame, embarrassment, abandonment, or loss of belonging. And American patriarchy reinforces these lessons constantly. Men are often taught that emotional openness threatens masculinity. That strength means self-containment, that asking for reassurance is weakness, that tenderness should be hidden behind humor, anger, detachment, or silence. Women are often taught something different, but equally limiting, that expressing too much need, anger, grief, disappointment, or desire risks being perceived as irrational, dramatic, difficult, or unworthy of love. All people learn to manage themselves carefully, to monitor their emotions, to edit their honesty, to stay emotionally legible enough to maintain acceptance. And over time, this creates relationships where people may deeply care for one another while still hiding enormous parts of themselves. One person withdraws because vulnerability feels unsafe. Another over-explains because they fear being misunderstood. One shuts down during conflict, another anxiously reaches for reassurance. One tries to avoid burdening others, another fears abandonment so intensely that honesty feels terrifying. And often, underneath all of these behaviors is the same quiet fear. If people fully see me, I will not be loved. This is why vulnerability can feel so physically uncomfortable. For many people, emotional exposure feels dangerous. The body remembers what happened when honesty was punished. The nervous system remembers what happened when needs were dismissed. The heart remembers what happened when tenderness was mocked, ignored, or weaponized. So people adapt. Some become emotionally guarded. Some become hyper-independent. Some become people pleasers. Some become perfectionists. Some avoid intimacy altogether. Some stay in relationships where they cannot fully be themselves because the fear of disconnection feels even greater. These are not random personal flaws. They are often survival strategies. And this is important. Vulnerability itself is not weakness. In many ways, it is one of the most courageous things human beings can practice. To say, this hurt me, or I need support, or I'm scared, or even, I don't know, and I want to be loved honestly. That kind of openness requires enormous trust, especially inside a culture that teaches people to associate emotional control with safety. But intimacy cannot exist without vulnerability, because intimacy is not performance. It is not simply staying together. It is the experience of being known. And being known requires allowing another person to encounter parts of you that are imperfect, uncertain, and tender. This is what makes vulnerability so transformative. and also what makes it so frightening in a system that gives us very specific scripts to follow. This does not mean everyone should disclose everything immediately. Trust matters. Safety matters. Discernment still matters. But many of us have inherited emotional rules that keep us disconnected even from people who genuinely want to love us well. And the cost of that disconnection is enormous because when vulnerability disappears, relationships can become performances instead of places of refuge. People begin managing impressions instead of sharing truth, protecting themselves instead of connecting, surviving intimacy instead of actually experiencing it. But once we begin recognizing these patterns, something powerful becomes possible. We can start asking, what emotional truths have I been taught to hide? What fears rise up when I need support? And what would it mean to practice vulnerability not as weakness, but as a form of strength? If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who has helped you feel emotionally safe or someone you're learning to be more honest with. And remember, what feels deeply personal is often shared by those around us. We're learning how to heal together.